Well, we made it to Palm Sunday and the beginning of Holy Week as we once again walk the journey with Jesus from his entrance into Jerusalem on a donkey to his crucifixion outside the walls of the city on a cross at Golgotha. This until we reach the empty tomb. And today we are invited to pause and reflect on the events of Palm Sunday and to remember the donkey, the symbol of humility that Jesus chose to ride into the city on, not on a horse, but a young donkey. It was surprising then, and it's surprising now. You know, nobody really wants to be a donkey because they're thought of as being stubborn and stupid. We say things like, "Don't be a donkey." Well, we use a different word for it, but, you know, we say, "Don't be a donkey." Nobody wants to be a donkey. But Jesus chose a donkey. And I mentioned a few years ago to the children on Palm Sunday, I think God likes donkeys. They're humble creatures, and they work really, really hard. Who needs horsepower when you can have donkey power? Holy Week, of course, is part of our following the events of Jesus' life. And of course, we follow his life starting in Advent as we awaited Jesus' birth at Christmas time. It took us through Epiphany and then ordinary time as we revisited all those stories of Jesus' ministry and life in the Gospels. We heard again the stories of Jesus healing the lepers, calling Zacchaeus, the hated tax collector, to come and eat with him. We heard the stories of Jesus healing, his call to the rich man to sell all he had and to give it to the poor. We heard about the feeding of the 5,000 again, and the criticisms of Jesus for eating with people like prostitutes and the unclean. We heard of Jesus having compassion on the woman caught in adultery. We heard him tell the story of the Good Samaritan. We heard him telling those in power of their corruption. We heard him verbally spar with the religious leaders and scribes. And we heard again about Jesus clearing the temple a few weeks ago because the money changers were defrauding people. And then we heard about Jesus casting out demons and then foretelling his own death, reminding us just a few weeks ago in this time of Lent that God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. So we heard all these stories, and now we find ourselves once again recalling those very last days of Jesus' earthly life as he entered Jerusalem on the donkey. So we're invited today to step into a place of humility with Jesus and the donkey on this Palm Sunday. And I'm going to invite all of us for this moment to set aside our current context and issues and views and just try and see Jesus' ministry, the events of his life in Holy Week with new and fresh eyes. Because we are all admittedly so entrenched right now, and I include myself, in our political and ideological worldviews that it can really obscure our ability to truly see Jesus and hear his message without also hearing the narratives that are all around us. So I just want to name that first. But right now, I'd like to invite you. You might want to close your eyes or just focus inwardly for a moment and set aside the things about our current context. All the noise, all the competing voices, set aside. Set aside what the news says. Set aside what the politicians say. Set aside what you read on social media. Set aside your opinions about how a public health crisis should or shouldn't be handled. Set aside your opinions about people on the right and people on the left. Set aside the agendas competing and clamoring for your attention. Set aside the issues we all know constantly divide us as people, just for a few minutes. Pretend for a moment they don't exist. We can pick that all up later today in a few minutes, but for the moment, I invite all of us to open our hearts and minds as if that stuff wasn't cemented in our psyches. And then, with no axe to grind, to see that we're all just people together making this journey of pilgrimage, seeking God's truth together. And then ponder a couple of questions. Using just what we know about Jesus and the scriptural witness about what he might be saying to us today. Listen for Jesus' voice and let the other voices fade out for now. What would Jesus say about St. James? About La Jolla? About San Diego? About America? What would Jesus say about women? What would Jesus say about men? What would Jesus say about people of color? About Asian Americans? Native Americans? Mexicans? People from Central and Latin America? About our black brothers and sisters? About our white brothers and sisters? What would Jesus say about housing, low-income families, and the homeless? What would Jesus say about our children? What would Jesus say about taxes? About corporations? What would Jesus say about what's happening on our southern border? What would Jesus say about what's happening on our northern border? What would Jesus say about immigrants? About refugees? What would Jesus say about our Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, and Muslim neighbors? And what would Jesus say about the church and about Christians today? Who did Jesus hang out with, and who would he hang out with today? Who did Jesus eat with? Who would he eat with today? Where would you find Jesus? Who did Jesus preach to, and who listened to him? Who would listen to him today? What would Jesus say about people who are sick and what we could do about that? What would Jesus say about people who are hungry and what we could do about that? What would Jesus say about the way that we fight? About the way we talk to and about one another in our nation? Especially those with differing viewpoints. Who did Jesus have mercy on, and who would he have mercy on today? Who did Jesus have harsh words for, and who would he have harsh words for today? How and why did Jesus' shows of mercy and his harsh sayings get him into trouble? And what would get him into trouble today? Why did those crowds cheer for him on Palm Sunday? And why did the crowds yell, "Crucify him" on Good Friday? And what would people be yelling today? What was Jesus' purpose? And what would Jesus say is your purpose? Your purpose. Listen for his voice. And then, let's all go and follow him to the foot of the cross again this week with open and humble ears and hearts. Amen.